I want to do is lay out where you're going over the 2 days and where you want to be at the end of the 2 days. Because I think that helps you focus on each of the activities or each of the speakers or what we're going to do to really understand. And we're going to do something that's a little bit complicated. There's a couple things that are a little complicated. So I really want to guide you along with that. So where you're trying to get is by the end of your 24 hours together is to have come together and identify what's going to be the legislative agenda for the Thriving by Design Network. And you are all representatives of a large network. Kate's going to talk a little bit more about the process and how we got here, but it's been going on for a couple of months, as Jane said earlier. And you've heard from a lot of people, and you've come up hundreds of wonderful ideas of things that are important to people were generated through these 2 months. And there's been a lot of review of those and a lot of distilling that down into some digestible, actionable ways of thinking about hundreds of ideas. And we're going to be looking at those and working with those for the next 2 days. And by the end of tomorrow, you're going to have come together with these are the things that we as members of the network are standing behind. This is what we'd really like to see the legislature take action on in the next couple of years. And then you as individual organizations, people can carry that forward. Jane and Brett will talk tomorrow about where they're going to go, where their organizations are going to go with all of this. But that just to know that that's where you're getting to by the end of tomorrow. We're going to do 2 activities in the 2 days that are going to help you get there. And one of them is going to be today. What you're going to do is have a chance to look at these themes that have come forward and reflect upon those. And they have been organized, all these hundreds of ideas have been organized into these kind of policy areas, policy buckets. For a lack of a more elegant word, I'll call them a bucket. And they are things like human potential, or economic development, democracy. And we're going to go over those. We're going to spend some time with those later. But those are the buckets into which all of these legislative ideas fall. Then they are organized by a theme, a category. We'll call it a category. So I'll just give you one example here. So in this area, which is the economic development, there's a category under there that's childcare. Lots of ideas about childcare, but the big theme is childcare. So how on earth are you going to decide between these 100 ideas that are up here, like this one or this one? You could do all kinds of different analysis. You could pick a lot of different ways to analyze them. The way that we have decided for the purpose of today is we want to see which of these areas, such as childcare, it is organized now under economic development. But if you think about it, childcare, if you pass legislation that helps provide access to high-quality childcare, affordable childcare throughout our state, you're not only helping with economic development, right? You're also helping with human potential, which is another category. So a lot of these things interconnect. And we're going to do an activity a little later this afternoon where you have to put your thinking caps on and you have to start identifying where the interconnections are. We're going to do this with dots, and when we're all done, I think you're just going to start getting a visual idea of where there are some things that are really powerful because they address several different programs, policy areas with a certain theme. But to get to there, we need to understand what we're looking at. We need to be on the same page about what these policy areas mean. So I'm going to walk you through how we actually do that. But I just wanted you to know that that's where we're heading this afternoon. Then tomorrow, after you've had time to reflect, you've had time to spend more time with the materials that are in your folders, you've had time to have social hour and dinner and talk to people and sleep on it and take a shower. That's where I always get my best ideas. Then tomorrow you're going to say, these are the areas that we think we should prioritize. So that's going to be an activity for tomorrow. And from there, your legislative agenda is going to emerge. So that's the arc of where you're going. Let me tell you specifically what we're going to do today. So when I stop talking, Kate is going to get up and she's going to go over the how did this all get constructed. Some people were probably more involved than other people. We just wanted everybody to get kind of on the same page to understand how we got to this point today. And then I'm going to just lead us through maybe half an hour of reviewing what each of these high-level policy areas means. We're just going to read through it. We're going to have a little time to ask questions or have some reflection, just so we kind of make sure everybody's on the same, relatively same page, relatively shared understanding before we dig into this activity. And then I'm going to lead you through the activity where you find these interconnections. No, wait a minute, I jumped ahead. You get a break in there. You get a big break in there because you got to go check into your hotel. Right? So after we get all clear on the areas, we're going to take a break. It's a pretty sizable break you'll see on your agenda, but that's because we anticipate that there'll be lines at the check-in because everybody's going to be checking in at the same time. So we've got a pretty sizable time in there for checking in and refreshing and taking naps for the people who are so inclined. And then at 6, we're going to come back and do that intersections exercise before you have dinner. So that's going to be the run of the day. Let me quickly go through what's in your packets. So you want to look at your packets. There is the agenda, is there. There's a background. I think this might be somewhat what Kate is going to speak to. It's on the left-hand side, at least on the left-hand side of mine. And then there's a progress report. I think that's just an annual publication from Growth and Justice that they wanted to share with you. On the right-hand side, this is a packet that has, in bold, in the highest level of, in the biggest letters, are the policy buckets. So, human potential is the first one. And then underneath that, you'll see the themes, education, etc., etc. And this document has all of the ideas of what those things are. When you get up to this level, it doesn't get this fine-grained. So if you want to see the most fine-grained version of it, it's a big honking document, and you can look at it. Then there's this colorful one. They invested in all of these nice color print jobs. This is a worksheet for you. So, because this, finding the interconnections, you might want to reflect on that a little bit before you just start running around the room with dots. So we've given you a worksheet. And there will be a little time that people will be able to reflect on this and start working on where they see the interconnections. That you can just work at your own table by yourself. And then you can use this when we get up and do the dot exercise if it helps you. You don't have to do this, you don't have to turn it in if you don't want, but if you want to do it, it's for your help, it's there. And if you wanted to make notes on it and turn it in to anyone, you could do that as well. So I think that's the orientation I wanted to give. And Kate Searles is the Research Director for Growth and Justice, and she's going to tell us how we got here.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. So there are a couple of things I want to stress right away, and that is that part of what we're talking about is the blueprint, but most of what we're talking about is the policy agenda, the legislative agenda for the next 2 years. So we really need to keep those two things separate and not let them confuse us. Because the blueprint will contain a lot more than the policy agenda for the next 2 years. If there's something that we're really valuing and it doesn't make it on the agenda for whatever reason, that doesn't mean it won't make it into the blueprint. So that's one of the things. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got to here, and then I want to talk about the principles that we've been encouraging people to use as they think about the process here. And then I also, once again, want to review what's in the room. So we began collecting, the blueprint is made up of input from hundreds of people like you. We have focused on people who care about what's going on in various areas of policy. They have local problems, they see state problems, they actually see the local or regional manifestations of national problems. These are people who are committed to these issues and they are our experts. So we have collected information beginning in Granite Falls. We did a lot of work collecting observations, recommendations, insights into what the Thriving by Design network needs to accomplish in order to make a One Minnesota that works well for all, the equity blueprint. After the Granite Falls event, we did a survey. And once again, we asked for more ideas about what needs to be in this blueprint. What areas are you concerned that we must observe, we must deal with? So simultaneous with, so the next phase is kind of go on the road. Sarah, where's Sarah? Right there is Sarah. Sarah is our community conversations maven, and Sarah and her team put together about 24 community conversations across the state, and these were attended by about 200 people across the state. So we've made an effort to get in conversation more input from people around Minnesota. Parallel with this, we have worked on issue briefs. Could anyone who worked on an issue brief raise their hand here? Number of people. Bob? I'm going to call on people if they don't raise their hand. Yeah, there's good. We had about 22 authors writing for us. Now, we worked with people who, again, are working on the front lines of particular issues that are problems that have disproportionate impact, either across regional dimensions or racial disparities. And we asked them in their writing to both clarify what the problem is, how it disproportionately impacts some communities more than others, and what the solutions are. So some of their, well, most of their solutions are among our policy goals. In addition to these 22 authors, we had 24 contributors and reviewers, people who wanted to have a chance to look at the issue brief that we have, say, for healthcare. And it might be somebody who, we often ask people who have been working in a capacity where maybe they couldn't publicly author a issue brief, but they could sure review it. And we've got a number of those. So we have also 24 partner organizations, and we looked at their policy agendas and their policy recommendations as well. These would be organizations working everything from criminal justice to one organization is Voices for Racial Justice. So we currently have a rough draft of our blueprint that is about third the way through. Our plan is to release the blueprint in chapters, and the chapters will correspond with the buckets. So we are going to release the blueprint sequentially in 5 different locations that are selected based on perhaps the authors, or one of the authors is in a particular location, perhaps a key legislator is coming from a particular region, or perhaps a key community has developed some novel solution that we want to bring attention to there. So I would like to once again repeat what Lori said, because I know that these things can be confusing, and I'm going to use this side because this side has human potential. You will see, here's the elements of each of the 5 buckets, and you'll see that we've spread them out around the room. This bucket, every bucket has a problem statement. We're going to discuss them more, but these are key because when we look at other policy goals, there's 5 buckets, there's 23 categories, and then there's 89 policy goals. This, I know you can't see this, but the #1 policy goal says equity in education, referring to teachers and curriculum. What I want to tell you is that underneath that policy goal, the first time we did this, we just stopped with the policy goal, and it was very difficult. So we have 2 examples of actual action, recommendations for action underneath. You're not selecting the action recommendation. These are just to help you better understand what the policy goal is. So there's a problem statement, the bucket, the category, and then 1 through 89 policy goals that we're going to be working with. So the last thing that I wanted to discuss, I think you have a paper in your packet that says selecting policy goals for the Thriving by Design legislature agenda. So what it is, it's organized in such a way that it can tell you some of the work that we've already done. We have distilled what was 600 action recommendations down to a smaller number that I'm not going to name because it's pretty intimidating. But we also on this page talk about what our principles are. And there's one principle that we discussed in one of our workshops that it's not on the paper, but it is, the first principle is we're not going to harm anything. Do no harm. That is our first. Our second principle is to be focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. We are evaluating our regional policy goals, considering a racial and regional equity framework. And then we are additionally considering policy goals within light of the health, welfare, and equitable access to opportunity for the most vulnerable in our state. And second is we are seeking to highlight interconnectedness between the problem statements and the policy goals. So all of the policy goals here relate to this problem statement. Our job is going to be to see which of the policy goals over there relate to this problem statement. So one of the ways that some other people look at interconnectedness, they discuss it in terms of the triple bottom line. Now, the triple bottom line as a concept has been around for a long time. It's now popular in accounting circles in corporate America, and we're not